good? You good? Everyone good?
All right, who wants to go first?
Okay, well, first of all, you say you did over 30 interviews. Have you interviewed the 6 cops involved in this yet?
You know, I'm not unfortunately prepared to answer that question because we're still in the middle of the investigation, but there are only a couple, 3 interviews left.
Okay, are you afraid of, are you going to be revealing information around the time that the trial could be starting, or how do you balance that?
We're going to have to coordinate with the district attorney, but certainly we coordinated this with the district attorney, but we will continue to work with the district attorney. But for me, the most important thing about releasing that information for purposes of our review is to make sure we're done with the internal affairs investigation. So I really wasn't prepared today to talk about the incident because I've still got 2 people I need to talk to.
And the second part of your report comes next month, is that correct?
That's right.
How far along are you in that?
Well, we are very far along in the internal affairs investigation, and then the more broad investigation will be finishing right behind that. But April was the suggested time frame, and that is my goal.
One of the big things you talked about in there was prematurely releasing information and not confirming that. As media folks, of course, we want it as soon as possible.
Yes.
We also want it to be accurate.
Right.
Are you afraid that your recommendations in there are going to could very well shut down information in the future?
Well, gosh, I hope not, because we are a proponent of transparency, so it was interesting for me to have to recommend in this case the need to have more caution in release of information. I agree of the need that the media has and the public has in getting information, but it's also important to get it right. I think you can balance those two, and it doesn't mean you shut down. It doesn't mean you don't answer questions at any point, but you say, give me a day or 2 and I'll get back to you.
The release of suspected broken bones, whose agenda was served by that, in your opinion?
Well, I don't know whose agenda it was, but it did create an inference, didn't it, that it was intended to create sympathy for officers. And in fact, what the inference was is always an important part of any release of information, or the inference that can be gained. In this case, information about the officer's injuries, should that go out? When does it go out? Most importantly, if it goes out at all, it's got to go out.
Who set the agenda for your report? In other words, you came up with these 4 issues yourself, or did others say, these are the questions we want answered?
Well, the questions that were answered were questions that could be segregated from the actual incident. And so there is a number of controversial issues that are surrounding the incident. Many of them go to the actual assault or alleged assault. But these were segregable and were able to be discussed in a way that it doesn't impinge on the actual upcoming proceedings, criminally or administratively.
Do you recommend that there be a policy about the release of photos of individuals, particularly? Do you think they should have released the photo or not?
I don't know. In this case, in my view, it deserved further discussion and a higher level of review and more thought. As we say in our report, one thing that could have been done but wasn't done in this case is to consult with the family. See whether the family had other photos that could have substituted in replace of the media's request for who this guy looked like. That would have been another option. But bottom line is, as we indicate in our report, this is a different scenario than the general scenario of just taking an arrestee and then releasing the booking photo of that arrestee. This was 2.5 years down the road, and I think different calculus should have been applied.
Is it through Kelly Thomas's name his father wants his son to be cleared?
Well, I'm not sure what is meant by that, but what I can say is that, at least with regard to the stolen property issue, as it turns out, and as I indicated in our report, the property was not stolen. The property had been discarded or lost, and probably, although we'll never know for sure, Mr. Thomas picked up that property, first the backpack and then the mail, or vice versa, in his 40s. That being said, the officers didn't know what it was. The officers did not know at the time that they were going through the backpack what they actually had. And in fact, they called back to dispatch, as I indicated in our report, to say, hey, we need to learn whether or not there has been a report of stolen property.
Mr. Gennaco, what strikes you about this? What strikes you about this?
Well, what strikes me is, one, the intense interest surrounding this terrible tragedy, and that's